I actually really enjoy it. And what I'm consistently impressed with is how people will come out. I don't get much time during the weeks here, so almost all of those have been on Saturdays. And we have people come in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening, and that's very impressive to me. Sorry, I'm just going to shake just a little bit from the cold. So thank you for coming out. What we want to do is answer as many questions as possible. So I'll take just a couple of minutes and share some thoughts with you, and then let's jump right in. Last Saturday, we spent large amounts of time talking about the shooting, and I suspect that's heavy on your minds, and so we will talk about that. What I learned last week is if we don't limit that, we'll spend the whole time on it. And so if you're okay, let's not take 20 minutes or so, okay, and I don't want you to feel like we're not giving it enough time, and we'll play a little bit by ear. But I just know that there's so many questions and so many suggestions and so many thoughts that we'll take the whole time. I also have learned from experience that I have a hard time answering everybody's question. And so what I've learned is we'll just kind of start and fan across the room and get to everybody, and then if you have multiple questions, if you'll just hang on until we get through, and then if we get time, we'll come back to you with your second questions. Good?
Is it a time limit or a question limit?
It's a time limit.
Oh.
We have another town hall meeting in Cedar Hills. I wanted to say Cedar Fork.
Cedar City.
She said it was coming out.
20 minutes here, right?
But my guess is based on the other meetings, we'll get to pretty well all the questions. We usually do that. So let me jump in and tell you, you all want to sit down? You're making me nervous.
Yes, yes, seats are out here, please.
We've got plenty of seats.
Everyone wants to sit in the front row.
It's okay to be in the front row.
I'll move to the front row if that helps.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do the
It's the front row thing, right? I've been in, it's close to 100 days. We hit 100 days.
It was yesterday.
Yesterday was 100 days. And if you can imagine, in those 100 days, I have seen 3 shutdown votes, 2 government shutdowns, tax reform, the shooting, the memo, the other memo.
You see those?
Did you actually see those?
I read the first one, yes. I read the second one.
Oh, I'd like to know.
Yeah, so if we talk about the memos and we'll get and I'll share my perspective on that. But I guess my point is that I feel like I came in at a time that was very volatile, where a lot is going on. And my first vote, I was sworn in November 13th and voted 10 minutes later for my first vote, and without a staff or anything like that, so we had to quickly put a staff together both for Washington, D.C. and here in Utah. I have an amazing staff. Corey Norman is my chief of staff back in Washington, and Troy is helping here with the campaign. Thanks, Troy. He wants me to remind you, and I want to remind you that we're doing a couple of things in addition today. We'd love to have your help in any way, and he's got some sheets to sign up. I am collecting signatures as well as going to the convention, and we both passed. And so if you're willing to sign that signature, we need to collect the signature. A couple of you are here gathering signatures. You know what that's like, to gather signatures. We'd also like to encourage all of you to think about being delegates at the convention and to go to your caucus meeting. And if that's a foreign thing to you, if you haven't done that before, we have a lot of great instructions and tips. And so if you sign up, we'll walk you through how to do that. So it's not a growth experience. So with that, let's just jump right in and answer your questions. Should we start with the shooting? Is that heavy on everybody's minds? Do you want to start there? And let me just share a few thoughts and then see if you have questions. Like many of you, found out about this late at night, and the immediate reaction was to put out a tweet or a response to this. And we held back. We held back for over 24 hours. And because I've learned in these experiences that people don't want to hear a statement from an elected official that simply says, I feel bad, and I extend my prayers. And they want specifics. They want to know what we're going to do. And so I came out with a few specifics at the time, and I'll share those with you in just a minute. But like many of you, I've watched the dialogue, the national dialogue on this, and my list has grown. of things that I personally want to do. And then I believe there's a long list that we all need to do. I think as I find out more information, we failed these kids and their families in significant ways. The most shocking and most recent information was that there were 3 or 4 deputies outside that school while the shootings were going on. And that it was a nearby agency that actually entered the school before the agency that was responsible for it. That there was a school resource officer there armed who stood outside that building, and that's shocking and disturbing. And it's not the only thing that's shocking and disturbing about the whole thing. So I think we let these kids down in many ways. I think that there are some federal responsibilities here and some things that we let them down on and that we need to do. I don't mind telling you that I'm a gun guy. I spent a large percent of my career manufacturing shooting ranges and installing and designing shooting ranges. My personal opinion is we don't have to tread on the Second Amendment to do some significant things to help and to improve the situation. There's no reason, in my opinion, a device that makes a legal gun illegal should be legal. And that just seems like it's something that we can handle very quickly and very easily and that we need to do. I was not aware, had never even thought about the fact that we have an overlapping problem in age, where we won't let somebody that's 18, 19, 20 buy a handgun, but we will let them buy a rifle. And I think that's something that we can easily fix and shouldn't be a problem. We have a terrible background system. The background check system is flawed and has some serious holes in it, and that is something that we can do and should do very quickly and fix. And the House actually passed a bill, it's been about a month ago, that would make a requirement for government agencies to load their data into this national database. They don't all do it right now. And that has not yet made it through the Senate, but that needs to immediately make it through the Senate. But we can do more on background checks, and we need to do more on background checks. I had an opportunity yesterday to call my school superintendent in the Provo School District and talk to him about this. I wanted to know what he thought and what he expected, and I can compare that with me. I was very impressed. He sent me an email with a list of things that the school district has done. And it's an impressive list. I won't try to read all of them to you. I'll show you. It's single-spaced, and they have a long list of things that they have done as a school district. And to me, it's a model. Maybe all the other school districts are doing it too. They might be, but it was very impressive to me what they are doing for locally to make sure that our kids are safe. In the Provo School District, they have a unique situation where they've just rebuilt 5 schools. So they have the luxury of building these schools with security in mind. And he told me things, for instance, that if a child comes after the start of school, they have to actually enter through the office and go through the office to get into the school. And our schools, many of them are not built with security in mind. And somebody that knows security would go crazy trying to secure these buildings with so many points of entry and things like that. And so we need to start giving our schools resources to fund some very simple security things that they can do. You've heard a lot of discussion about teachers and firearms. If you're a teacher, I don't blame you for hating the idea. Very few teachers would be qualified or comfortable, or would we want to have a firearm with them. One of the things I'm starting to talk about, and I say it that way because I don't want anybody to jump to a conclusion, and I think one of the problems is that we need to be in a position where we're willing to entertain and debate ideas even if they're bad. Right? When you brainstorm a lot of bad ideas, eventually will lead to good ideas. And to me, there's a little spin-off of this concept of guns and teachers, and that's this concept that I've been thinking a lot about, which is that in a given school, you have hundreds of employees. Is it possible that 1 or 2 of them have the qualifications and the skill set and the comfort level to carry a firearm? And if that's the case, could we enlist them and have them actually train with the local police department. So heaven forbid, if there was an incident, that there was somebody in that school trained and qualified with a firearm that the police department knew about before they actually arrived and could communicate with. Those are the types of ideas that I do think we should be talking about and kicking around and seeing if something like that would work. We allow pilots to carry firearms on an airplane only if they have reached levels of qualification that can show that they wouldn't be a detriment on that plane. A lot of people with a gun would actually be a detriment. So those are the types of things, and I've actually started, I have not completed it all, but it's my little matrix, and I've listed federal government, state government, city government, county government, school districts, families, and then I've started to kind of fill in what I think we could all do to make this situation better. And I actually think we all own this, if that makes sense, and that we all need to work on this in fixing a situation that by no means is acceptable. I don't think in any means is acceptable. So, great way to start a conversation, right? I'm sure you have questions. Let's jump in and we'll hear this again. I'll just kind of fan across and then we'll get to it.
So first of all, just a couple comments on the shooting, working in our local government with the incident we just had. But then I have a question about the opiate situation. So first of all, we had a threat that came to our school district this week. Because there were good family relationships, another child who saw that threat was able to work with the parents. Because there were good relationships with law enforcement, they felt comfortable going to law enforcement. It was handled within a matter of an hour of the threat going out. It was handled. And that goes down to the relationships. If you have a community where people are scared of their parents, or the parents or students are scared of law enforcement, if you don't have that communication set up, that's not going to happen. And these people who post it on social media one day and do it the next day won't get stopped. The other issue is we have done a lot of trainings in this valley with school employees, with law enforcement. I work with the county attorney's office. We've been to those trainings. There have been a lot of things that have been very good. So in Wasatch County, I'm not saying feel safe, but feel like we are doing everything we can.
And I would echo that for Utah County. I feel like they're also doing much of those same things. Can I interrupt your train of thought? One of the things that you remind me of that I didn't mention is what I'm hearing about from doing some other states are restraining orders, firearm restraining orders, which give family members the ability to get a restraining order on somebody they feel like in their family is a potential threat. Once again, another idea that is worth a lot of debate. You can have due process involved, so that very quickly that individual who lost that right could go to a judge and either get it back or verify that that was a good restraining order.
And I'm just going to comment that also one of the things that needs to happen is greater enforcement of the laws that are on the books, because I think that will take care of a lot of situations. Yeah. Now, a question on the opioid epidemic, and I just say the drug epidemic in general, because while we have more overdose deaths from opioids, the property crime rate and the other issues associated with methamphetamine are just as bad or worse. So my question is, what is the federal government's, in your view, what is the federal government's job when it comes to those? What is the state and local government's job? And what is the federal government going to do about the overprescription of opioids that leads to the addictions, that leads to the abuse, that leads to the deaths and crimes?
So every once in a while I'm going to pull out, it's only been a 100-day card and tell you I can give you partial answers to that, but not at the depth that that question actually deserves, but I'll give you some thoughts. I believe that we need to spend more time on prevention and that there is funding that comes from the federal government for that. And we need to make sure that that is adequate and that's getting down into programs that work on prevention. I also believe that our criminal justice system needs to be reformed. That locking up somebody with addictions, particularly when you get somebody that is just getting into this world and then we throw them into a jail cell with somebody who's a hardened drug user, we're exacerbating the problem. So I think that we're all starting to become aware that our whole judicial system needs reform. not into jail, but we need to get them help. There is a serious awareness problem, and I don't know what legislation is required on the way we're prescribing medication, but I think that needs to be addressed. There is some discussion, and I don't have enough information to know how valid it is, that we don't have good pain relief options, and this is where the whole medical marijuana discussion comes in. And the Utah delegation, the House delegation, just all co-sponsored a bill that would get the federal government out of the way when it comes to test on medical marijuana. We don't have the data we need on medical marijuana to make the decisions. And much of that is because the federal government is in the way of that and stopping that. So our bill gets the federal government out of the way and makes them start to be more cooperative in that testing. Yes.
So I really appreciate you coming out, first of all, and I really appreciate that you have seen you put a lot of thought into what's going on with the gun issues and shooting in schools. I was 11 years old when Columbine happened. So pretty much my memory of my life has been a shooting after another shooting after another shooting. Because before, when you're like under 11, you're not being pretty carefree. I also now work underneath a professor at UVU in Orem, and I'm working towards getting my master's in academic advising. So I will be at a university and I will be working with students. I actually have about 50 students right now that I teach ethics, which is a fun subject right now, right? to do. But after the shooting in Florida, I was very concerned for them because I do have a responsibility for them. I also reflected on my own life and how it feels like guns and mental illness and all these things that are, there's a multifaceted issue.
Yes.
I think some people are saying it's only one issue or it's only this, but it's very multifaceted. That it's really, really complicated. But from your end, you have members in the House that are both Democrats and Republicans. I myself am a Democrat. What are you seeing as far as the partisanship on this right now? Just from the last week you've had, how the House is handling this at the very least, because that's who you're generally with. Are they trying to work together to solve, or are they staying in their camps and refusing to yield?
I think you're going to see a merging coming out of camps. I think this reminds me a little bit of immigration. I'm sure we'll get some immigration questions, but there is a lot of momentum to solving immigration, and this is much earlier in the evolving process. I think you're going to see people willing to go places they have not gone before, in what they will consider. I personally believe that we can respect the Second Amendment and make some changes.
I think you're absolutely right. I really do.
And part of the problem in the past is, you were right, we've gone into these camps and said, oh, it's all about mental illness. But if you only control guns. And the reality of it is, there are so many layers, and like I said to begin with, the number of places where we let these kids down are all over the place, right? And unless we go to all of those places, we're fooling ourselves if we say we're going to make schools safe by doing one thing or two things, right? We have a whole multitude of things. One of them that actually came to my mind as you were talking, that wasn't your question, but roughly 20 years ago, there was concern that the CDC was getting political on gun control. And so there was a bill passed that said that the CDC couldn't do research that was political, and then they took their funding away. That was intended and interpreted to mean that you couldn't do gun research. And the bill didn't specifically say you can't do gun research, it said you can't do political research. Unfortunately, those of us making decisions have a real void of data, and their best decisions are made with data. And so one thing we need to do immediately is get studies done, not necessarily on gun safety, but on school safety. And then that takes into account mental illness, it takes into account guns, right? It's not just targeted at guns, it's targeted at what's all the factors that are causing this, so that lawmakers can make intelligent decisions based on fact. And when these things happen, it is quite emotional, and you tend to go into these emotional decisions. But I think the answer to your question is, I believe you see people moving off some hardened positions on this. I hope so, yes.
Yeah, Representative Curtis, I heard your presentation earlier today when you voted.
Don't tell my story.
I'm not going to tell anybody the story, but when you voted against the budget bill, you said you need data in order to make decisions. If you look at the data, we're bankrupt. Yes, there's just no question about it. It's just a question of when. So if interest rates normalize and the debt service winds up being bigger than the military budget, it's just a mess. But nobody wants to address it because it's really an ugly situation. So you had the nerve to vote against the budget bill. What can you really do to try to get the monster under control?
A lot of things that have happened to me since I went to Washington, D.C., I would say are in the surreal category. In many of them in a positive way. When I was sworn in on the House floor, that was surreal. It was like, this can't be happening, this can't be real. When I watched the vote go down on that, it was surreal to me. It was, I don't understand this. How can this be happening? And it seemed to happen with such ease, if that makes sense. So I'm a little confused myself on the answer to your question, because I saw things melt that shouldn't have melted. It should have been hard and firm. It melted, in my opinion, too quickly. Ultimately, we must talk about the 2/3 of the budget that seems to be off limits. And think about this. If you were having problems in your household and we went in to deal with the problems and you said, oh, but you can't touch this, and you can't touch this, and you can't touch 2/3 of the problem, there's not enough room left, right, in that pie that's a third left. So let me just suggest a couple of things that I feel like we need to get people talking about. Social Security. And I know everybody gets all stressed out if I say Social Security, but it's not that hard. We just need to be honest and say, look, those who are at retirement age or near retirement age, we're not going to mess with you. You're safe, right? We're going to keep our promises to you. But I have 6 millennial kids, and they will live far longer than we ever expected them to when Social Security was put into place. And I don't have any problem going to my 19-year-old and saying, we're moving your eligibility to get paid back. And to my 25-year-old, my 27-year-old, my 30-year-old, we need to do, that is something we can do, that we should be able to get consensus on. But right now the dialogue's not going on back there on that. We have people receiving assistance who are able-bodied, healthy, living in their parents' basement. And we need to be frank and talk about those types of things. And to me, those are the answers to your question, how we finally get serious about this monster that's coming at us.
Well, since you bring that up about Social Security, I think an easier solution would be to simply reverse the abhorrent tax reform that was just passed that's going to blow $1.5 trillion in our current deficit. Why not reverse that instead of going after people who have earned a Social Security payment over their lifetime?
So let me clarify. I'm not talking about going after somebody that's paid into it for a lifetime. Not talking about that at all.
You're talking about going after my generation.
No, I'm saying to your generation, let's do what was intended when it was put together. And all we're going to do is keep that eligibility date in track with life expectancy. That's all we're saying.
But if everything's on the table, why not reverse this warrant tax giveaway?
Because many of us disagree with your assessment of it.
Okay.
That's why. That's why it was put in. My personal opinion on it is that it will have some impact short term on the deficit. Here's some numbers that are significant. The gross national project, thank you, project, has been hovering around 2% over the last 8 years. If that moves simply to 3%, it's $50 trillion in 10 years. So Republicans have felt and believed for a long time that people do better with their own money, and when it's vested back into the economy, that increases the size of the pie. And that's what the bet was. Now we'll find out. Right? Time will tell if that's true or not. Already, there's been some very significant things happen that say it was a good decision. Pardon?
For instance, please.
For instance, the projected GDP is climbing rapidly already in the first quarter. The number of dollars invested back into the economy by companies taking portions of their savings and investing it back in employees, investing it in infrastructure, and bringing dollars back from overseas and getting taxes on that is far more significant than anybody expected.
The vast majority of that's going to stock buybacks. Do you see that as a positive impact on our country?
I would disagree with you that the vast majority is going to stock buybacks. What I hear is Apple's 20,000 jobs, Apple's $30 billion in infrastructure, Apple's $28 billion in repatriation of dollars back to the United States. Sure, there'll be some stock buybacks, but there's a lot of good things happening as well.
From just some information that I've been reading, that 1.5 trillion deficit, it actually, with the Joint Committee on Taxation, that actually is estimated, even though you can, positive impacts, job growth, whatever, they're still projecting that, even
There was
after.
some of that projected, but not nearly the amount that's happening.
Not nearly what?
As much as already has even happened.
Wow.
Okay.
I
Did you have a different question? Okay. We'll keep coming back. So I'm just keep going to kind of fan across here. Yes.
So I think you just illustrated why we're not seeing problem solved. The national debt was brought up, and we immediately went to specific items. Social Security. I'm in this corner on Social Security. I'm in this corner on the tax cut. Everybody in here has to live on a budget. And that budget starts with, how much do I make? And that's where I think the national debt isn't getting resolved. The balanced budget isn't getting resolved because people have the idea that government has a limitless amount of money. When I say, well, I want the government to do this, I don't think about, okay, where's that money coming from? How do you feel about tying a budget to the GDP, a percent of the GDP? Government, you have this much money to spend based on this percentage of the GDP. Now, you have that amount of money to spend. Now we have to decide how are we going to spend that money. And then that's when we begin to prioritize the items that we need to fund. How do you feel about that?
I like that. I would support anything that would bring us to a balanced budget that would tie spending to expenses. Here in Utah, we have a balanced budget. Every year, our lawmakers make hard decisions. As a city mayor, I balanced my budget for 8 years in a row. My first year, the very first thing I had to deal with was 2010, and revenues were down by over $5 million. That was about 8% of our city budget. So we had to cut by state law. Well, I had two choices. I can raise taxes. I mean, you thought that was a good idea, right? Or I can cut. We were able to cut 8% out of pro-city government, and two things happened that surprised everybody. We increased productivity in the city, and we increased morale. Because people were more efficient, and we didn't have dead weight